Okay, in this session we're going to create some organisational units in Active Directory, and we'll create those organisational units in relation to the various job areas. So this is business functional areas within Get Well Medical Practice. So because this is a GWMP super clinic, if I open up my PDC, our domain controller, and then open up Active Directory, users and computers. What we need to do to create an organisational unit is to right mouse click on the domain name, and then we can look at the operational masters and raising the domain functional level if we wanted to, but that's probably not a good idea to do that right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to a new organisational unit, and we're going to call this the job function areas. So the first one's going to be doctors, and we'll go OK. I'm going to leave the protected container from accidental deletions ticked. And so now we've got an organisational unit here that says doctors, and right mouse click new organisational unit, admin staff. Okay, same deal, new organisational unit, and we'll call this next one nurses, and new organisational unit, pathology, and we're going to also have organisational unit, radiography, PHY, radiography. Okay, and right mouse click new organisational unit, and dentists. Go OK, and the last one is chemists, new organisational unit, call it chemists. Actually, maybe that one should be called pharmacy. We will change it, PHARMA, pharmacy, like that, pharmacy. So I've changed the chemist to pharmacy. Okay, so users, doctors, admin staff, nurses, pathology, radiography, dentists and pharmacy. Now we could also create organisational units that are not related to job function but to either a geographical location or a device type designator. For example, things like all Wi-Fi laptops could be in a organisational unit, or we could create groups that do a similar sort of thing, but we can't delegate administrative control to groups. So within the doctors, we're going to have two groups. So if I have a look in the doctors, if I new group, and in here I'm going to have a group called laptops, and it's going to be a global security group, and it's located in the doctors organisational unit. So what we're looking at is that only the doctors are allowed to have laptops that will be able to use the Wi-Fi that's at this practice, and later on we might look at maybe a guest network where people from the public can sit and access the internet via our wireless using a guest wireless network. Of course, that would need to be filtered, and otherwise we could have all sorts of strange things happening with our wireless network. So at this point, often in users we would create groups and members. So in here, for example, I've got a user group, which is a global security group. And in that global security group, if I look at the members, I've got user 1 and user 2. And there's user 1, user 2. And then I've got some additional users. So we could do the same thing. I mean, the users is sort of like a built-in area for the domain, whereas these organisational units, we can also put users and groups inside there, and also other organisational units. So you can have an organisational unit within inside an organisational unit. The other thing that we can do with organisational units, I'm going to create in the doctors organisational unit two new users called doctors. So if I go new user, DR1, and his password is just the usual password 9. And I'm going to user cannot change his password, and his password never expires. So there's Dr. 1, and it's easy enough to copy one user to another. So if I just do a right mouse click on Dr. 1, copy, call it Dr. 2. I'm very inventive with naming. Next, same password. Okay, so next, finished. So there's two doctors. I'm also going to create a group within this organisation unit. Well, I've already got one called laptops, and so I could put some of the doctors in the laptops group or leave them out. So I'm going to create another two doctors, Dr. 3, Dr. 4, obviously. So go copy, Dr. 3, DR3, next, password 9, password 9, and copy him to Dr. 4, DR4, DR4, password 9, password 9. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight, say the first two doctors, and I'm going to add them to a group. So if you do a right mouse click on those, add to group, and the group I'm going to add them to is the laptops. But at the moment you can see the location here is the domain location. I need to change the location to the organisational unit, so I'm going to go to the doctors organisational unit, and I'm going to select the group lap and then check the names, and it should come up with the laptops group, which it does. So what I've done is I've added Dr. 1 and 2 to the laptops group. So if I double click on laptops group and look at its members, you'll see that Dr. 1 and 2 are in that group now. And consequently, if I copied Dr. 2 to say Dr. 5, he will automatically be added to that group. So DR5, DR5, next, and password 9, password 9, and go next, and whoops, must have typed the passwords incorrectly. Password 9, password 9, next, and finish. Well, that was a copy from DR2, and because Dr. 2 is a member of the laptops group, when I open up the laptops group now, you'll find that Dr. 5 is also a member because he was a copy of DR2. So, you know, you just have to be a little bit aware when you are copying a user to another user. All of the things that he's a member of, also the new user that you're copying to will also be a member of the same groups. So this is a reason why often you'd have a template user, which is often, when you create the template user, is the account's disabled. So when you copy it and create a new user, then you would enable the account and then later on add it to whatever groups you needed. Okay, so that's the sort of thing that we're looking at here, and I'd encourage you then to put some users in all the other groups. We might also put in some computers. So if I went new computer, so I might go, it's a DR desktop. So what would be the naming convention for this? Yeah, workstation, and it might be DR workstation D1, and you can see the user and group is by default the domain admins. We can assign this computer account as a pre-Windows 2000 computer, so we don't want to do that. User or group. I'm going to change where it goes and change its location to be in the doctor's location, and doctors, enter the object name to select. Okay, user or group. Okay, so let's go OK on that. So I've created a workstation D1. Let's go. I don't want to add it to a group yet, but we could add it to a group of general doctors' workstations. Interesting, you can't copy this. That's okay. So if I go new computer, it's going to call it workstation -D2. And if I look at what groups they're in, it's a member of the domain computers. Okay, so we might later on create another group that's, say, domain laptops. We could do that anyway. If we go to the users, we've got domain computers is where these guys are going into. That's all workstations and servers joined to the domain. In here we could create a new group and call it I'll just call it laptops. It's a global security group. It already exists. Okay. Oh, it exists in the doctors organisational unit. So we created the group there, and it is a global security group, so it's visible. Okay, so what we could do is just create laptop 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, shove them in this group, and then when we're referring to group policies, we might apply them against the laptops group, and then it applies to all of the laptops that are a member of it. So we've got 2 workstations here. Let's create 3 laptops. So we go new computer. I'm going to call this NB for notebook dash station. Okay. Okay, so where we're going to put this is, we'll call this like a notebook, and D1, and yeah, it all depends what naming convention we're using. Workstation, NB for notebook, that'll do. D1, and whoops, for some reason that's not quite right there. Properties. Okay, didn't come up. I'm going to delete it. Okay, let's go new computer. Just call it lap 1, that'll do. And I want to change the group to laptops. So it's going into the laptops group. And it's automatically put it into the doctor's organisational unit. So there's the domain, there's the organisational unit, and there's the group. Lap 1, and I'll create a new computer, call it lap 2. Did I put it in the right group? That's the question. Member of, no, I put it in the wrong place, so I'm going to have to remove it. I need to add, call it laptops, and I want to set that one as the primary group, and then I can remove this one. Okay, so now it's in the laptops as the primary group. So that was a bit of a roundabout way to actually put lap 2 into the laptops group. But what we want to do now is copy this. Can we copy? Good question. No, we can't. Okay, we're just going to have to create a new computer, call it lap 3. And I'm going to change the group and put it into the laptop group. And go OK. So now we've got 2 workstations and 3 laptops. The 3 laptops are in the laptop group, and the 2 workstations aren't. They're just in the normal domain computers group. Okay, so we've created a little bit of a complex structure here, but later on what we're going to do is use the ability of laptops to be able to dial in from outside. So that's why we've got them in a separate group. And what this demonstrates is that, number one, that we can create users, we can create computers, we can put them in different groups, we've got them in organisational units, and we've got them in separate global security groups. So we need to do a similar sort of thing for admin staff, nurses, pathology, radiography, dentists and pharmacy, and populate it with approximately 10 sorts of devices and users in each one of these groups. Okay, so the naming convention is something that you'll need to come up with as being so that you can identify where these things come from. So for example, the admin staff may have workstations, but it might be workstation D3, D4, etc. There won't be any other sections that will have laptops because they're only for the doctors, but they will have, nurses might be, N1, N2, N3. Admin staff might be AS123, whatever. Make it reasonably short, because typing all the usernames is a little bit tedious if you're going to use other naming conventions like, for example, Disney characters, Huey, Louie, Dewey, that sort of stuff. It's just more characters to write. So, but whatever naming convention suits, use that. Okay, so whatever works for you. Okay, so what we've done is we've created some structures and some users and groups in Active Directory. What we need to look at now is group policy. So with the group policy, we're going to look primarily at putting a different desktop on for different groups initially, and later on we'll look at locking down different groups, so that, for example, administrators might have a restricted amount of things they can access off the desktop, whereas other people may not. And we'll also look at later on setting up a global proxy system so that everybody can use the proxy server to get out. Most really good firewalls or gateways these days can act as a proxy server, and so therefore being able to set proxy within group policy is not a bad thing. And we can also look at later on using group policy to create roaming profiles and to redirect the roaming profiles for all users in the domain to set area on the domain controller, and that will allow increased security on the actual workstations themselves, but also it means that if perchance admin staff, for example, might use any of a number of different computers, whichever one they log into, their desktop will come up on that machine. So that's not a bad thing. And if we move between sites, then we would also do the same thing. We'd have roaming profiles across the entire organisation. And it wouldn't matter then who logged into whichever computing device in that organisation, their profile would then appear on that device, and that's not a bad thing. So here is our group policy management. One of the things I'd like to point out before we get started is the creation of the appropriate shares. So on my drive C on my server, I've created a folder called wallpapers, and in the wallpapers I've got obviously a bunch of wallpapers, and it's the settings on the wallpaper folder that's important. So if we have a look at the properties of this, and if you have a look at the sharing, you'll see that it's currently shared. I've shared it as, and the shared name is /PDC, which is the name of the server that it's on, and then the name of the folder. So that's pretty obvious. But who's got access to it and what level of access is the important part. So if we click on the advanced sharing, and we have a look at the permissions, we can see here that authenticated users have read-only access. There's no change or full control, whereas the administrators have full control. And it's just a matter of adding different users or groups into here and giving them varied levels of control. And later on, when we look at a proper directory structure for the location of the organisation's data, we will have a table that contains different groups of users and the level of access that they have on those folders, and then we'll need to put them in here. At the moment, this is fairly general. This is just a wallpapers folder that everybody in the domain has access to. So everybody that's authenticated into the domain has read access, and it's only the administrators that have full control, and nobody has any other levels. Now, share level access is one thing, but in balance with share level access, we also need to provide the same file level access or security. So if we look on the security tab, we need to also have that the authenticated users have read but not write. So there's no tick on the right here, there's no modifier, there's no full control, there's no special permissions. It's only the read functions that the authenticated users have via NTFS. Now NTFS is obviously a little more finer granularity than share level permissions. So the NTFS file level permissions, a little bit more specific. And when we look at the administrator, they have full control in line with the share level permissions. When we go to the advanced level and have a look at some of the permissions on this, we can see that no, we can't see. Show advanced permissions, yes. If you click on the show advanced permissions, you can see even more permissions. Okay, so we have the full control, but the ability to create files and write data, create folders and append data, write attributes, the ability to even delete subfolders and files or even delete it all, the ability to change the permissions on a file, whether it's hidden or not hidden, and the ability to take ownership over a file. Now, if I had full control, then obviously all of these things would be ticked. And if I click on that, you can see that's the case. I'm going to cancel that one because I didn't actually want to do that. So just read and execute for authenticated users and full control for the administrators. So I'm going to set up another folder and just show you exactly how I do this. So I'm going to create a folder. I've got wallpapers here. The next one I'm going to put is for the roaming profiles. So I'm going to create a folder, new folder, and I'm going to call it profiles. Okay, profiles. And I'm also going to create another one called the home directory. Okay, so the profile and the home directory have very similar permissions to the wallpapers, but if we're going to redirect the roaming profiles into this folder on the server, this is the way I do it. I'd right mouse click on this and go down to properties, and on the sharing, currently it's not shared, so I'd go to advanced sharing, I'd tick to share it, and then I'd add in the permissions. And by default, everyone has read access. The first thing I do is remove everyone, and then I'd add in the administrators. Now, when you type something in here, you can just put the first three letters, and whatever matches when I check the name will come up. So I can see here, the administrator or the administrators group is the things that match those first three letters. I'm just going to pick the administrators group and go OK. And the administrators group, I'm going to give full control on this share. I'm also going to add in authenticated users. Now, if I go advanced and find now, you can see all of the groups that are here. They're all here. We can even see the doctors groups, the domain users. I could pick domain users, but that's a little bit less secure than using authenticated users. Now, domain users just means every person that's in the domain who is a user would be selected. Whether they're actually in the domain or authenticated into the domain or not, they've still got access permissions. So, for example, if I was logged in under one user profile, I could access a share using a not active user, but a member of the domain. Even though that person's not logged in, I'd be able to use his credentials to access the share. So this is a little bit less secure than using something, say, authenticated users. So when I use authenticated users, it's only people that are actively logged in at the moment that have rights over the folder, rather than everybody in the domain having rights over the folder. So I'm going to use authenticated users, and the authenticated users have read, and the administrators have rights. Now, the authenticated users in this case, because it's a profile directory, so when people log out of their Windows client machines, we want their profiles to come back to here, so we need the ability to write to it. So in this case, I actually want them to have change level as well, so they can write information back to this profiles directory on the server. So administrators are going to have full control, authenticated users are going to have change level control. And that's the share level. And then on the security, I'm going to, and you can see there's a whole bunch of users and names and groups that have rights to, you know, we can see administrators have got, you know, and they've got all allow, users have got read, they've got these three things ticked. Now the reason why these things are greyed out is because they're inherited permissions. They're permissions that we've been granted because of the parent folder or drive gives those permissions. What we need to do is clear out all of the inherited permissions and replace them with only the specific permissions that we want. So when I click on the advanced button down here, you can see all of these, you know, we've got special, read, you know, administrators, all this sort of stuff, but I'm going to hit the button for disable inheritance. Okay, so I'm going to remove all inherited permissions on this object, and now I have none. There's none on here. I'm going to add in, for example, actually I'm not going to add in anybody at this particular level. What I'm going to do is going to go OK, and it says I've denied access for all users to the profiles. So what I've done is I've gone up a level. The reason I've done that is because it's much easier to add in at this level here. So I'm going to edit the access, or the people who've got access to this profiles directory at this level. So to change permissions, I'm going to click edit, and I'm going to add in the administrator. Well, it comes up with both, so I want the administrators group, and I want the administrators to have full control. Okay, so we've got full control, and then I'm going to add in the authenticated users. If I just put in the first few letters and check, it'll come up with you know, all the users or groups that match those three letters. So authenticated users, and the authenticated users, I want them to have up to modify level, because you can see here at the moment they don't have write permissions or anything like that. But if I click on modify, they also get write. So what that means is that the authenticated users can now create a directory and read and write via the NTFS permissions into that folder. And that's important because when a user creates his roaming profile in that folder, he will be the owner of the folder and no one else will be able to access it unless they're able to take ownership over it. And that's the modify command here that allows that to happen. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK on that and close. So now I've created a profiles directory that has both share and file level permissions, saying that the administrator has full control and authenticated users have change, modify or read write sort of permissions. I'm going to do the same thing on the home directory. So I'll go a bit faster this time. So properties, sharing, advanced sharing, share the folder, and then I'm going to look at the permissions. I'm going to remove everyone. I'm going to add in the administrators, administrators group, and I'm going to give them full control, and I'm going to add in the authenticated users, and I'm going to give them change level. So this, the home folder is going to be the same as the profile folder, and so that's okay on the share level permissions. And then on the NTFS security permissions, I'm going to go to advanced and remove the inherited permissions. So remove all inherited permissions, go OK, and then edit the permissions and add in again the administrators group, give them full control and add in the authenticated users. I'm going to give them modify level and go OK. So that's it. That's the profiles and home directory put in place, and the wallpapers are also in place. And this will allow us to create roaming profiles, and we're going to use our group policy to put wallpapers in for particular groups. Okay, so I can exit that and look at my Active Directory, users and groups. I've got one group called laptops, and the users I've got a user group. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a group policy that in the doctors, the laptops group will get a different desktop to everyone else. So what we might do is change the default profile for the doctor's organisational unit for one particular desktop, and then the laptop group will get a different desktop as well. So we'll give that a try. So on the group policy, at the domain level, I could actually put this in the doctor's level. So I'm going to create a new group policy object at the doctor's level. And this one's going to be called all doctors. Okay, and so if I expand that a little bit, there's the all doctors organisational unit, group policy. So I'm going to right mouse click and edit it. And what we're going to look at is putting in a wallpaper. So if I go to, I think it's preferences, Windows settings, nope, go back to policies, administrative templates, and then desktop, that's where we want to go. And there's the desktop. So we're going to, I'll just hit standard here so we can see it a little bit better, enable the active desktop. So we'll go enabled and maximise that so we can go OK. And we want to put a desktop wallpaper on, so if I double click on that, I'm going to enable it. And here we're going to use, there's two different paths that we can take. We can use a local path, but all workstations will not have a copy of all the wallpapers on each and every workstation. So using the local path is useless. So what we need to use is the UNC naming convention, which says //server / the share and then the file name. So in our case, the name of the server is going to be PDC. The share is going to be called wallpapers, and then the name of whichever wallpaper that we want to use. So I'm going to go //PDC /wallpapers. Whoops. //PDC /wallpapers. And then /, and we need to pick a wallpaper. So I'm just going to whiz and have a look. There's our wallpapers. If I change the view to, well, it actually doesn't show anything. Okay, we just see a default picture. So I think we'd better guess rather than anything else. Home, okay. So if I use, say, Alina, yeah, I'll use Alina, and there's one called Drops, so Drops or Alina. Okay, so we're going to call this one, say, drops.jpg, and I want this to stretch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just test to see whether the access to this is okay. So if I highlight that and go copy, right mouse click down here and go run, and then Control V and see if we can see it. Yeah, that's what drops look like. Okay, so we know that that's the right one. We're going to go OK. And so if I go exit out of this, what I've got is applied against all doctors against this organisational unit is that policy. So we're going to add in another one. If I create a group policy in here, and I'm going to go the laptops group, laptops only. Now, one thing I would like to just mention, on the All Doctors group policy, we'll note that it's against all authenticated users in this organisational unit. The laptops only, by default, when we create it, is the same. But what we want to do is we want to remove this and add in only the doctors, and the group that we want to add in is the laptop group. So if I check the name, there's the group. So now it's going to be applied against the laptops group within the domain, which is in that organisational unit. So on the All Doctors, where it's got all authenticated users, I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to add in the location, and I'm going to set the location to be the doctors group, doctors organisational unit, sorry, and I will go authenticated users there. So so it says that the path is the doctors organisational unit, and it's the authenticated users in that one. So in this case, it's the doctors authenticated, the doctors organisational unit, and the group is the laptops group within that organisational unit. So we're now applying a group policy that's limited to only the laptop users group of users in the doctors organisational unit. So what we're going to do is right mouse click and edit it, and policies, administrative templates, desktop, there's the desktop. I'll maximise that, and I'll enable the active desktop, and maximise and go OK. And on the wallpaper, I'm going to enable it and Control V. That was the drops that we had before. We want to change this to, I think the other one I had was Elena, E-L-E-N-A. And I'm going to test that that's the one that we are after. I'm going to change that to a stretch. So I'm copying all of this, Control C, and right mouse click and run, and Control V, and that shows I get to a different wallpaper image. That's what we wanted to see. Okay, so we go OK on that, and we're now applying that wallpaper against the laptops group, or laptops only group policy, against the laptops in the doctors organisational unit. So we'll go exit here, and what we need to do is to test this. So I'm going to minimise the group policy, have a look at in the laptops group who's actually in it. Members was Doctor 1, 2 and 5, so if I go Doctors 2 and 3, I should get different desktops on each of them. Okay, so I'll do that, and actually if I look at the members, we only got lap 2 in there. We probably should put lap 1 and 3 in there as well. Can I just... No, you can't drag it in. Members, let's add members. Let's go to the location of the doctors, and let's add in lap. Okay. Add. it's in the right location. If I go advanced, find now, can't find the actual machines. It's probably because of the object types. I need to change it to include computers. Okay. Find now. So now I can see the additional laptop computers. So I'll add those in. So now I've got Doctors 1, 2 and 5 and laptop 1, 2 and 3 in this group called laptops. Okay, so it's Doctors 1, 2 and 3. If I try those, I'll get a different desktop. So we're going to try that. And on our workstations, so if I pick the Windows 8.1 for example, I'm going to log out of sign out. Yeah, going to sign out of that user. I'm going to pick another user and I'm going to log in as DR2 and password 9. Now this does take a little bit of time because it's Windows 8.1. It wants to install all apps and rubbish because it's that's what Windows 8 does. I'm going to pick another device, say Windows 7 here. I'm going to log out or log off that user. And I will switch users and I'll pick DR3 and select password 9 and log in as this user, and I should get a different desktop on these two machines. Now you'll notice the desktop here has got the drops, so the group policy has worked, but this was for all doctors. So what we've got here is we've got the same one. So the policy here for all doctors has taken precedence over the group laptops. Okay, so what we probably should do is look at the preference or the order so that the correct policy gets applied. So if we go back to our PDC and back into the group policies, here's our organisational unit for doctors, and you can see here that all doctors has a higher priority, and therefore its desktop will get applied in higher preference to laptops only. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to reverse those around so that the laptops only is in a higher in the link order rather than all doctors. So what should happen now is that the devices and the users that are in the laptop only group that have that laptop only group policy, they'll have a higher preference than all doctors, and therefore that desktop will be applied to only the members in the that particular group. Okay, so I've changed the order. What I need to do is to right mouse click and run as administrator, and then run GP update. So it's group policy update and /force, and apply that. and that's the computer policy. Then it'll do the user policy. There we go. So it's now, from the service point of view, it's applied that policy. From the user point of view, I'll see if I can do a GP update /force at this point here, and we can see that it will do again the computer policy and the user policy. Okay, so now what we do is we sign out and sign back in again as that particular user. Log off. Okay, so we'll log back in again. Now it's back in as DR3, so if we go password 9. Now what you might have noticed is I've still got the same desktop, because it sometimes takes 2 attempts before it actually fixes itself. So I'm going to log off again and log back in again. There's a reason for that, in that the profile is cached locally on the hard drive, and it will use the cached profile rather than going back and getting it off the server. So okay, so it hasn't worked. And I'll pause the recording here, find out what the problem is and come back. Okay, so what we're going to do is the user that's on this machine is DR3. I was trying to get this one to change, but in actual fact DR3 is not a member of the laptops group, and therefore the doctors only desktop will apply. So this is the one that should apply. It's actually the other computer, this one here, the Windows 8.1, that is, if we log in as DR2, because he's a member of the laptops group, we'll get a different desktop. So if I click on this and log in as DR2 and go password 9, we will get the different desktop. Here it is. So that's related to, on the PDC, when we look at our group policy, in our doctors group. So if we go to our if we have a look at our doctors organisational unit, we can see our laptops group includes doctors 1 and 2, so that's a member of the laptops group, but Doctor 3 wasn't, so he's just a straight doctor. But the laptops group contains Doctor 2, and our group policy for the group that had the laptop was to have the Alina wallpaper. So if we have a look at our administrative templates desktop, go to desktop, and we can see here the wallpaper is the Alina wallpaper, which when we have a look at it is that one, and that's the wallpaper that does actually appear on Doctor 2 on this particular machine, whereas Doctor 3 is not a member of the laptops group and therefore gets the standard doctor background. Okay, so that shows organisational units over here on our PDC. We've got organisational units. So we've got doctors and dentists and admin staff and all these. And in the doctors we've got multiple users and multiple devices. And I've got a group that contains some of those devices. So I've got a couple of the doctors, but not all of them are in the laptops group. And we've applied a group policy to all the doctors in the doctors organisational unit. And so they get a particular background, which we see as this background. And the ones that are actually in the laptops get a different background, which we see when we've logged into this particular computer here, this being Doctor 2. So that ends this particular video on the creation of organisational units, users and groups within those organisational units, as well as devices. The setting of a group policy that changes the desktop depending on which group you're in, and also the setting up of some of the folders so that we have the right permissions, both NTFS and share level permissions matching, that allow access in this case to the wallpapers folder.